So the world is made of two fundamental states, order and chaos. And you need to learn how to operate in both of these realms if that's what life is made out of, because it's the world as you experience it. So, how do you operate in the realm of chaos? Well, that is the question that you could say religion is trying to solve. And it's the question that we're going to explore today. So, you already know how to operate in the realm of order. You already know what you know, right? The realm of order is the known land, explored territory. It's your daily routine that you've been following for a long time, and it's become second nature to you. You don't even have to think about what you're doing. You just go through the routine every single day. And when something unexpected happens, that's when chaos manifests itself. Now, it can do this in two ways. At least you can experience it in two ways. You can involuntarily face it, which means it was completely unexpected and you didn't want to have to face that chaos. But you can also do it voluntarily. You can choose to confront chaos, to confront death and destruction and evil and suffering. You can choose to voluntarily face that. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining what happens if you voluntarily face that. And it's what the Israelites do. At least they face the catastrophes. It might not be voluntarily, but we can assume that it is, because if you do not voluntarily face chaos, if it just comes upon you, it can destroy you, right? Because when you have a frame, a perception, a daily routine, for example, and something unexpected happens, and that routine or that frame of perception is not able to deal with the unexpected event, then that means that the framework or daily routine is now insufficient for facing the things that life presents to us. And what that means is that you either have to make an adjustment to that system or make a completely new system in the first place, make a completely new framework. And in the story of the Exodus, the Israelites, they're in slavery. And so they have a frame of perception, and that is that they just listen to their tyrant. They have someone tell them something that they're supposed to do, and then they just do it. Now, of course, that's not without complaints, but they do it. And you can see that whenever they go into the wilderness, they immediately, almost immediately, make Moses the judge over them, because they don't know good and evil. They don't know anything. They've just been obeying orders their entire life. And so they almost make Moses their tyrant. And then Jethro comes to Moses and he tells them to set a judge of the Israelite people. Set one person over 10, one person over 50, one person over 100. And so there's a hierarchy with Moses at the top. So if the judge of the 10 can't do it, then it goes to the 50, then to the 100, then to the 1,000, 10,000. And I think there were like 600,000 total. So that could have gone plenty far up. And then if a matter was, if it was serious enough, if they couldn't figure out who was in the right and who was in the wrong, or the punishment for both people maybe, then they would bring it to Moses. And that made them self-reliant, and it helped get rid of their slavery. And so the Israelites, they had that frame of perception. And then whenever they were called by God, when Moses brought them out of the land of Egypt, they were told that they were going to go to the promised land. And they did. But they didn't go there instantly. Before they went to the promised land, they went to the desert. And the desert is worse than slavery, actually. So you might question that and say, well, how can anything be worse than slavery? And of course, some things can be worse than slavery, but it's just a desert. Like, what's so bad about the desert that it's worse than slavery? And I think when the people who don't understand why the desert is worse than slavery is because they're the type of people that think that if you have a tyrant and if you have a bunch of slaves, all you need to do to fix the whole situation is take out the tyrant. But that's wrong, because you have a tyrant, but you don't have a tyrant without slaves. You don't have slaves without a tyrant. If you get rid of a tyrant, the slaves don't stop being slaves. Because, again, who is a slave? A slave is someone that just takes orders from other people, right? They do nothing on their own. They think of nothing on their own. They don't know good and evil. They can't judge among themselves. And the reason that the wilderness is worse than tyranny is because they're still slaves. They're still reliant on someone else, and they make that person Moses. And it takes Moses setting judge over the people. It takes 40 years maybe for the people to stop being slaves. It does. It does take 40 years for the people to stop being slaves. And one of, if not the only thing, the main thing that set them free was the knowledge of good and evil. It was the ability to do things on their own. And I don't mean on their own as in separate from God, but I mean on their own as in separate from other people. Now, we should still take advice from other people. And in fact, if you don't know what it is that you should be doing with your life, you should look to what other people have been doing for thousands of years, or in the modern time, since the world is so different from what it used to be. Look at what people are doing now, and look at what's working, because you can see that. You can look at other people's actions. You can look at someone who's 30 years old. You could say, okay, they went to college and they got a job, and hey, they're doing quite well, so maybe I'll do that. Maybe that's not the best thing for you, but it's better than nothing. So anyways, the Israelites, they voluntarily confront chaos. And what does that mean? Why is it so terrifying? Why is chaos so terrifying? Well, because they had a system, right? And when they went into the desert, they complained. They said, oh, would it be that we were still in Egypt, where we had food and water and shelter and whatever, but no, God took us out here to kill us. So the desert's terrifying, right? Because you have to trust God, and maybe that's all you have to trust in, because when you're in the desert, your frame of perception has collapsed. You're in chaos, right? You use your frame of perception. You have an aim, you have a goal, and you assign meaning to things because of that, right? There is a plethora of facts, a plethora of meanings in the world, right? And if you don't know what is meaningful and what is irrelevant, then you're in the state of chaos. You're in the wilderness. When you're in tyranny or in the promised land, you have a frame of perception. You're assigning meaning to things. But when you go into the desert, you lose that frame of perception. You're just in chaos. There's meanings and facts everywhere, and you don't know what to do with them. And that's why it's terrifying. The story of the Exodus is the process of learning itself. That's something you should understand. When you learn, you get rid of an old idea, an old system of belief. You get rid of that, and you build on the knowledge that you already have. And maybe you learn something so revolutionary that the whole system that you have going needs to be replaced. Now, often it's the case, especially with incremental learning upwards. You take the old system that you have and you make a new system, but that new system contains actually most of the old framework. I keep using system, but framework that you use to perceive the world. Well, let's go over what is the framework that you use to perceive the world. When you see objects, you don't just see objects, you see meaning. You see pathways and you see obstacles. Why do you see pathways and obstacles? Because you have an aim. So you put this all into a conceptual framework. You have what is, who you currently are, the unbearable present, and it's unbearable because right now is not sufficient. And if it was sufficient, well, that would be bad, because that means that your current suffering is just how life's going to be always. Right, so the unbearable present. Then you have the ideal future, who you could be, what could be. So what could be the sequences of behaviors required to transform one into the other. That's how you see the world. And a description of that framework is a story. And that's why the stories of the Bible are so incredibly useful, is because it shows somebody acting out that framework or acting out a framework, and you can see the consequences of their actions. And you can see that what they're doing is good to follow. And so if you don't know what to do yourself, look at other people, but you can also look at the Bible, the stories of the Bible, not even like the written law, but the stories of the Bible, and act out those stories and see what happens. And the story of the Exodus is like a meta story. It's the story that describes the process of transformation itself. And in order to transform your life in the smallest or in the largest way, you have to voluntarily confront chaos. And maybe that's worse than where you are right now. Maybe you're in a bad position, and the desert, so to speak, is still worse. And you need to voluntarily confront that and reconstruct your frame of perception to deal with the new catastrophes of life, or the old, and the old, and be resurrected. And that's the story of Christ, the death and resurrection, right? Christ says that he will be in the heart of the earth, as was Jonah, for 3 days and 3 nights. And so Christ faced the worst possible punishment for the least deserving person, but that wasn't enough, right? That is like the essence of tragedy itself, but that wasn't enough. He also had to face hell. And the death and resurrection story is bear your cross and voluntarily confront chaos. And that is exactly what Christ calls us to.